Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all well. Happy Sunday. So last week, I took the level of practices further. And there are even layers beyond what I spoke about. But what's important is to realize that we are on a journey. And, the first thing to do is to center and call in God before I launch right into it, right? So I think that's an important part of the journey, is to try to always remain connected and centered, and to try to bring God into what we do. So let's practice that right now, okay? So put our hands together, kind of bring ourselves into the space we're at, and leave behind things that happened today or yesterday or last week, and not have in our minds things of today or what we'll do afterwards, and try to bring in a sense of presence, of that clarity that we're trying to connect with, that sense of wholeness that exists within us. Okay? So when we call in God, we're not only calling in God and His blessings, but we're also summoning forth from within ourselves those attributes of God, and also we're summoning forth the best aspects of ourselves. And through our practice, just by doing this, our mind has learned to calm itself down and be less active, so our innate awareness, presence, the heart of God, can sort of manifest in that moment, and find some stability moving forward during that period. Okay? Put our hands together. Deep breath. Be mindful of the angle of the fingertips, so you achieve that sort of energetic connection with your heart. You feel your alignment. Eyes, I do it with my eyes closed. Okay. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Abba, Abba. that's interesting. I've forgotten everything that I said before that. So, the last 3 months, we've learned to cultivate something more expansive. Regardless if we realize it or not, our minds and our perceptions and our egos are rather limited. And in many ways, we project ourselves in the world, become busier or involved in many things to try to achieve a certain state of expansiveness of doing. But in doing so, we often lose track of ourselves. We get so caught up in that momentum of actions, we've lost touch of our home base. And by taking the time to sort of step back, we're learning to cultivate, we're training ourselves to connect actually with a place of ourselves that is very expansive. And our mere presence and awareness doesn't require anything more than that to feel interconnected and engaged. We realize by not doing, we could actually be much more engaged in where we are and more skillful, and also connect with an inherent place of awareness that's deeper and more profound and even more accurate than if we project our mind and our thoughts and our ideas on the situations around us, as opposed to absorbing it and then seeing it with a sort of eye of wisdom. You get a lot more information and a certain awareness. But that deep place that we're learning to cultivate and reach in a way, but it's interesting, it's not a reach outward, as we've been talking about, but it's really the letting go of the reaching outward to settle in that place that's always there. So it's not even a reaching inward, it's more of a settling to a deeper place within us. And that place is very connected to everything around us. It's very aware, and it's inherently compassionate and loving. And it's connected to sort of all that is, and in a way to all that was and to all that will be. It's very connected to the presence of God. And when one learns to sort of live there, you transcend a normal human life to the type of human life that we were meant to have. When it's just very aligned and connected and at the right frequencies of really being a presence on this planet. And naturally your world changes around you because you engage with it differently. So in many ways, the last 3 months is starting to learn the techniques, develop the commitment to take time away to do the practices, and to start having a taste of a different way of being, a deeper connection to God, a deeper connection with ourselves, different sensory perceptions. Some of you may have had certain perceptions that you're like, oh wow, my God, what's this? Never perceived things in that way before. Or better in connection with your inner voice. Knowing things that you really can't figure out how you came to knowing that, because logically things didn't lead to that, yet it ended up being accurate. These are things that come up that give you encouragement that you're on the right path. If they haven't, they take a while. In the first 3 or 4 months, I didn't really get anything. I could barely sit still. Right? So, in a way, in these 3 months, I presented almost an entire path. Pretty much presented entire path. You know, the last teaching last week, I can go to layers deeper. But I went really far. That could take people a couple years to get, if not longer. But that doesn't mean one doesn't have levels of that realization, which are very profound. So I really explained stages to progress. I doubt anybody here who started from knowing nothing would be able to get as far as core teaching number 16 in 3 months. If you are, wow, truly blessed and very, 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 very rare. And I say that because I don't want people to get the perception that this is like, you know, the 8 steps of riding a bicycle in a month and a half and off go the training wheels. We're really working with it, but that doesn't mean that every step we sort of achieve, even at just trying to stay present, it all unlocks something. And I hope that all of you have certain experience that. And realize that this is something worth going deeper with. It's a progress. You know, you don't become an 18-year-old overnight. You learn, but that doesn't mean nothing happens and then the switch is flipped at the end. It's sort of, you know, one of those switches where the light moves slowly from dimmer to fully bright. Well, that's kind of what's happening. And you sort of realize there's whole other levels of perceiving the world. And then life becomes really, really amazing. But you didn't think that was kind of possible in that way. So we're at our last week. The path is really a path of being more open, aware, awake, and connected. That's one way. But this ain't really fully Eastern teachings, right? We can call in the grace of God to help. And by doing the practices, we really learn to pray. Because you really are able to connect in a very deep way. And by getting ourselves sort of out of the way, we're able to connect to God much easier. And hear that wisdom. It's that voice in our mind, our thought, sort of instinct that we normally brush off. We start listening to it and be like, whoa, what's this? And I believe it's the voice of God. And our life changes. It's what I call the path of devotion. It's known as the quickest path, even in Eastern teachings, interestingly enough. Because that interconnection through the heart is the most powerful sort of connection. You enter into a relationship with God. You enter into that frequency, and then you're in that frequency, and it sort of has you. There's this sort of guidance, and it's really important to pray. The 72 names of God is a form to connect with power of the names, power of God, the healing of God, the forgiveness of God, the wisdom of God, the compassion of God, the love of God, the caring of God, right? The omnipresence of God, power of God, the protection of God, the strength of God, right? All those good things, right? But let's not forget, prayer is at the core, that conversation we have with God. And we can have that conversations with God, and then we could listen if we hear something back. A feeling, a sense, or thoughts. So this is really a complete, holistic, whole practice that I'm sort of offering. It doesn't negate traditional prayer. It does not negate going to services. To the contrary, it's encouraged. But it also gives us access to things that make things move along a little faster. These practices of space, of being present, the mantras of God, going beneath that to a deeper form of presence, what I've mentioned last week, moving from the Pinto to the spaceship, right? Brings us closer to God in that communion and in that conversation, in that alignment. See? So in the next week, keep these thoughts in mind and bring those into your practice, and however you feel, try to get into that sort of warm embrace, that alignment. Because once you're able to start feeling that, then the rest of our lives is just in deepening that. Right? Well, as we live, we're always deepening that. So why don't we just maybe do a little bit of that together? And yeah. And before I forget, so next week we're going to have a little celebration for the last 3 months. So regardless of what time zone you're in, for me it's 7 in the morning, bring a piece of cake, right? A nice little piece of cake, maybe with a little rum in it, make it a little special. And why don't we all have something sweet to celebrate with? A nice little something to drink, cranberry juice, whatever you wish. And we can sort of together, say congratulations to ourselves for doing this. It's something. It's very not common nowadays. And I think it's worth celebrating, and it's really beautiful, and we're worth having some congratulations for. So next week, why don't we do that? Always with all of this, go slow, and if you need help, you go get help, right? You take this slowly. I've been doing this over 2 decades, and if you count my whole life, which has been very religious, we're talking, over 4 decades. There's a beauty in the journey, and when I first started, I must have, is in the Tibetan world, 2 years in, I spoke to a woman who was older than me, and, she said this to me. I said, wow, you know so much. And she goes, I've been coming here for 18 years. And my mind was a little blown. And she goes, don't worry, it passes fast. And maybe one day, 18 years later, you will still do it. It's just one day after the next and leads to the next. It's really no big thing. It just means I've been at it longer. Because it just seemed like, wow, that's like, oh my God. And it's just quite ordinary. It's quite sort of... And suddenly I remembered a couple years ago, wow, that woman, I've kind of become her. But I have to say that every step along the way, from when I really started at age 12, has been so beautiful. Some of my most beautiful moments when I was 18 to 21 in college at this most beautiful church. Level of devotion and caring towards Yahweh was really amazing. Really fed my heart for the rest of my life. And one of the prayers to Yahweh I used to sing for wow, a decade or two afterwards, sometimes when I was walking down the street, it was just so beautiful and so devotional. And it's really that connectedness. It's not about the level of being able to do things. It's the connectedness. And there's always a next level. Let me tell you, there's always a next level. And even the first steps, the first little insights are really as amazing and as powerful as insights somebody who might be doing it 20, 30, 50, 80 years. And I say that to encourage everyone to keep doing it. Days become months, that become years, that become decades, and then everybody's like, oh my God, how'd you get here? And I'm like, one day at a time. But every day had something really connected, or another working towards it, and it just felt like it made my life more meaningful. So I really want to give everybody encouragement. You know, the core teachings, put them all out there, so they're out there and available for when it's time. But I had tastes of that, a little bit here, a little there, a little more here, sort of throughout. But to receive that actual instruction was a while. And that's just a certain way of teaching that they have. Then there's other teachers that just giving you up front and center, and then teach you all the steps to really understand what was said. So I kind of fall in that school. So, but ultimately, that space that we reach is one of love, of compassion, of caring, and of connectedness. And that's actually the teaching of those schools. But the thing is, there's no God there. Big difference. And when I meditated there, the last 20% just didn't make sense to me, and it never did. And I noticed that wall even 1 or 2 years in. I'm like, that sounds nihilistic. And supposedly nihilism isn't what it is by their own teachings, but yet I couldn't. And the further I went, I'm like, I'm not seeing how it just doesn't sort of it just didn't line up in that way. And I came to the conclusion that there was something missing. You see. So everything you do needs to be with awareness, and things may be helpful, but then sometimes there's just an end to how far it can take you. Right? There's a grounding to this universe. There's a where it came from. Right? It came from something. Nothing could be created from nothing. Right? It's nothing there. They can't have something from nothing. Something came from somewhere. And that's the ground here. There is ground here. And that's God. That's Yahweh. God of the Old Testament, the New Testament, and maybe by other people who pray to God, and they get there in their own way. Their intention is right, their heart is right, their actions are right. They just don't quite know the name, they don't have the same scriptures, but God's there. And He sees them, and He values them. So let's keep that in our core. This is the path of devotion, of love towards God. And with that is our ground from which that fertile soil that nourishes us, that gives us water, that has the nutrients, that actually provides the sunlight as well, because that's the source of everything. The soil, the water, the air we breathe, the sun that nourishes us. Our intelligence, our wisdom, our food engenders our growth, provides teachings, sages, prophets, living saints that provide books that educate new generations, the rabbis, the priests, the scholars that write texts that educate people who are not as educated as they are, that guide people. All these are facets of God. The person that helps the old woman cross the street, the person that helps tutor children, the people that help people who are mentally challenged, who are old, who are infirm, doctors, even lawyers who help clients because they are in need. These are all manifestations of God, of us helping and sustaining ourselves, making this world a better place. The view is very expansive. And as we work on ourselves, we begin to have a more expansive perception of what's going around here. We also develop a greater sense of contentment and a form of happiness that is harder to move, to shift, to lose touch with. You know, I went to India. I backpacked for 2 months by myself. Northern India and Nepal, Kathmandu. Always wanted to do it, so I did it. I saw people with literally nothing, no hope of ever getting anything, no education, living in poverty, completely blissed out, and they were not on drugs. They had a certain trust in God, and there was a certain contentment that they had. And even from our perspective, we would have been very depressed and despairing. They didn't show any of that. And in fact, they were dressed as best as they could, and their face was clean, and they had a very uplifted spirit. And there was a lot of teaching in that. There is a way, it's possible to tap into that kind of source where one lives from a different place that doesn't so much have the norms of our society and what should or should not make us happy, but we're rooted in a deeper way. And God nourishes our roots, provides the nutrients in the water and the air, is such that we bloom where normally things don't bloom. We have wisdom in areas where most people don't have wisdom. We see things when most people are 90% blind. How? We've connected. Our roots have gone deep. Our leaves are able to extend call in that carbon dioxide that nourishes leaves, capture that sunlight, make our photosynthesis where other plants wilt and die. Or just don't thrive and stay small while we grow large and strong and provide fruit. These are the blessings of God. These are the blessings of the practices that we've been doing. These are the fruits of the practices we've been doing. And this is why I've been encouraging you all to do them, to learn them. To learn, read the Tanakh, the Bible, pray, do the practices, contemplate them, contemplate your life, make changes where necessary, so we are able to bloom, because God wants us to bloom. So I wanted to keep this a little shorter this week. Why don't we just do, a quick little practice together as a group? I think that'd be very nice. And, work on blooming this week, our final week. In front of your prayer space, do what you feel it needs for you to bloom. To be in that connection, in that union with God, where you feel that sustenance, yes. Where you feel that sustenance, that nourishment that permits you to bloom. And that really is sort of that ground zero. Right? It's that sports car. It's blooming, right? The truck's got a lot of bumps and things, right? It's going along, getting there. But when you get on that sports car, right? On the fast lane, yes, that's blooming, right? Special fuel, doesn't take the normal octane, right? What does it need? 91, 92 octane needs a special fuel. It's blooming, it's humming along, right? Life is easier because you're in the pocket. You get into the pocket. And you have tastes of the pocket all along. And that gives you encouragement. So don't forget the cake next week. Right? I'm going to find a little rum cake because, this needs to be special. We need a little zest of, and there's a certain thing. You know what? There'll be a little teaching. Some people could find a little rum cake, or you can't. Well, and if you can do alcohol, put a little rum or something on top of it. And, we'll do a little practice with that one of my teachers taught me. And we'll end that way. That'll make it really special, I think. So, alrighty. So we do this briefly. So why don't we, if you have, put up some incense in front of your prayer space. So have your eyes closed. Move the microphone a little closer here. Okay. So, sort of line up. So I'm in a chair, but I have my hands sort of cupped in the middle of me, sort of between my two legs, the left hand on top, the right hand on the bottom. That's what works for me. You need to do what works for you. Remember, there's the new meditation page on my website. I show different hand postures. This is one of them, as well as seated postures. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at it, please look at it. So it's www.wisdomoftheshalom.com. I've added a lot of resources. Okay? So line up, eyes closed. Put your awareness, if you can. We'll work on placing awarenesses in the next month or two. But if you can, try to put your awareness where your heart is. If you've worked on placing the hands with fingertips together in the heart area, you have felt where that spot is. So, and you have learned where it is energetically. So you don't necessarily need to put your hands there to feel that spot, because you've now accustomed to it. So you could just put your mind or your awareness and try to feel that area there and just relax. You could say the name of God a couple times once you're in that spot to further relax and connect. But you keep your awareness where you're focused. So let's say, right, so that breastplate area, just assume there's a little fly there and it's irritating you, and you focus on that fly. Don't do this. This is just an example to focus, right? So you're feeling that irritation in that fly, right there, right? So because you feel it, your senses hone in on that spot, right? And you know where it is, so you know where to swat the fly away, correct? So that's what I mean by placing your awareness. So you feel, you look where that spot is, and you feel for that energetic spot. Just slightly, it's just kind of slightly below the sternum, but still there. For me, when I do this, actually it's a little different now that I think about it than where the heart is. This spot is a little bit in the middle of the breast area right now. There's a sort of, yeah. So we're a little bit below the heart chakra. In the middle, between the two breasts, there's an open spot there. But you go where you feel it is, but you keep it above the breast area, the pecs area, okay? We don't go below. I'm not teaching those exercises, okay? So you find your alignment there. There's the core strength there, okay? Say the name of God a couple times. Just breathe out, relax. You're very aligned. So we say, Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh. So emanating from that place, if you have a deep connection to God, feel the love that you have from God, and let that energy flood your body and all around your body. Sort of an openness to that energy outwards, so you kind of feel it all around you from every pore. Or if you could think of someone you love dearly and use that love to kind of fill your body and all around you. And then know that that's the same kind of love that God feels for you and that you desire to feel for God. And translate that love you're feeling to say, if only it's a desire to be able to feel that for God for some people. I'd like that to be for God. But the important thing is to feel the love. So if you can feel that, and just let it surround you. Like a bubble in you, around you. It's warm. It's full. It sustains us. You remain present in it. And in a way, that feeling and that emanation is our anchor of our awareness for this practice. I feel my muscles feeling warm all through my body and feeling very relaxed and feeling like somehow they're being healed. My body's generating actually extra warmth. You might be able to see a warm orange light around your body. Don't project one, but sometimes that might enter our awareness, or gold or something. You see how all these things are related? So it all builds on each other. Start at the basic technique, and do you see how it's suddenly getting more, for lack of a better word, more advanced? But it requires sort of going through the steps to have the stability, the practice, the alignment and cleaning of our channels. And then we're able to do things that have us have really amazing prayerful or meditative experiences that help us to go deeper and assist us to live from that place even when we get up and leave that room, and carry that energy into our lives, to carry that feeling into our lives, to carry that awareness into our lives, that wisdom, compassion, and love, that presence of being. Honestly, what separates a normal person from a religious, a truly religious or spiritual person, or a living saint or a prophet, is their presence of being. You walk into the room, it's palpable. You feel it coming from them. It's that presence of being. That good grandmother, or that good aunt, or that good friend, or that neighbor, or that person you see once in a while, you're like, wow, wasn't it a lot about their presence of being? There was some warmth coming from them. There was something special that actually attracted you to them. It made you feel safe around them. These are characteristics that we end up cultivating by doing these techniques. All right? So maybe this week, if you feel called, you could try this yourself. If it's a little challenging to just hop in like I did, well, do your normal practice, right? And then towards the end, when you're aligned and still refreshed, you use this as the next step, the last step. That's what I used to do. You used to start here, you work your way up through your practice, and at the end, you are sort of well warmed up and exercised, for lack of a better word, and then you try this as the finishing thing. And then you always say, thank you, God, and you show your gratitude and thanks, because He was the practice. He was part of the practice. He helped the practice come about, because it's always based on God. And then we say some prayers of gratitude or whatever we wish, or when we're in that state of alignment. It's a beautiful place when you're there in that warmth to pray. Prayers are deep there. And it's not for asking for things necessarily. It's often just a lot of gratitude. And saying thanks is so important. It's not a one-way relationship where we get in relationship to God, so we have the hotline to ask for things or to complain about things. Most prayers should be a lot of gratitude and thanks and appreciation, or just trying to have a conversation. It's that connection, that communion. It's honestly what we all seek, or otherwise you wouldn't be listening to my voice, would you? Right? The wish of connection, the wish of being in fellowship with what's divine, the devotion and the love and the prayer, and gratitude for that time you spent in prayer, meditation, loving kindness, presence. Always, please, 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 have gratitude at the end. And even if it was a struggle, even if you couldn't attain, quote unquote, attain or not, because there's really no attainment, even if you still show gratitude for the technique in the hope that one day you will be able to go deeper and feel things or more things. But it's always the gratitude that God is there, that you're able to try, that there is something to connect with. And that itself is a very profound technique. So thank you so much for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you all next week.